Good afternoon. So for those of you who don't know me, I am David Bowman. I am the Executive Director of the Four Corners Regional Education Cooperative #1 out of Farmington, New Mexico. And this is number 11 in our Tech Bits series. We've got a total of 14 that we'll be doing. So we've got some fun things coming up, actually. This, I believe, is actually the very last session dealing with Excel. And we've got some things coming up about freebies on the web, just to get people a chance to poke around and have some fun during the summer, and just a variety of upcoming sessions. But this is officially number 11 that we're preparing and presenting. And the primary topic today is around Excel, go figure, but basically turning a mess of a spreadsheet into something which is actually usable and attractive. Because one of the things that often happens, and I am both a victim and a cause of this. Sometimes when we open up spreadsheets, it looks like just a lot of junk going on. Hard to read, hard to use, don't know what we're looking at. But there are some strategies that I have used and developed over many years to turn a mess of a spreadsheet into something which is actually manageable and usable, and something we can look at and say, oh, now I know what's there. So we're going to run through 4 types of strategies. Dealing with content, dealing with rows and columns, some visual aids, and then actually doing some modifications within the cells as well. And under each of these 4 categories, a short handful of techniques that I have found to be very useful over the years. So let me jump in. I'm going to share my spreadsheet. I've got it blown up pretty big, but if you need me to make it a little bigger, feel free to unmute yourself and let me know. So let's get over to Excel right away. There we go. All right. In case you're curious, this actually is a modified version of our event registration database or event registration spreadsheet. Just so you don't panic, all the names have been replaced. They are all fake names. And I took out the email, so your registration might actually be in here somewhere, but all the personally identifying information has been stripped out. But it gives us a good test case to try out some of these strategies, because right now we can't read so much what's there, and there's all these crazy cross hatches under some of the columns. I mean, what is that about, right? So we're going to turn it into something. I'm going to show you a bunch of different techniques to make this user-friendly, which is the topic for today's session. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we see that a lot of the content is getting cut off. Like if we look at the first column, event name, tech bits, something, right? There's more content. The problem is it doesn't display because I have stuff in the next one, and that column is not wide enough. So there's a couple ways we can deal with that. And I'm going to ask that folks please mute your cameras unless you are specifically speaking to us. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it. So thank you. So let's take a look at a couple of ways that we can, first of all, deal with the columns so we can actually see what's in them. Now, so what I'm going to do, I'm looking at that column A right there, where I can only see the first few characters. I'm going to move my cursor right in between the header for A and the header for B. So here's column A, here's column B. And if I put my cursor right in between, it turns into a different kind of cursor. So right now it's a down arrow, and over here it's a down arrow. But if I put it right in between, I've got a line with arrows pointing out in both directions. And when I double click there, it's automatically going to expand that column to fit all the stuff that's inside. Now, at the same time, I could, same cursor right in between, same little T right there with the arrows. I can make it whatever size I want, okay? And frankly, I don't always need to see all of the content. I just need to see enough so I know what's there. So I might actually expand it all the way out and then back it up a little bit sometimes, just so I can get more columns across the page. But for now, let's just blow it up. So that's how we do one. But I've got a lot of columns here, going all the way over to AA. I don't want to do that one column at a time. And if you've been to any of the previous sessions, especially those on Excel, you've heard me say I am fundamentally lazy. I want to do things as easily and as efficiently as possible. So I want to just do all of them at the same time. There's a trick. Now, I could, on my keyboard, do Control A and just select the entire worksheet. In case you didn't know it, up here, see, I've got my A, and over here I've got 1. And right up there in the corner, there's a little gray triangle. And I can click that. That will also select everything all at once, which is pretty cool, right? Because sometimes my hands are on the keyboard, so I'll do Control A. And sometimes my hands are on the mouse, so I will click that little triangle up in the upper corner. But there's two things we can do to select. But sometimes I don't want to select everything. I just want the columns with data. So I am going to click, in this case, on B, the top at B, to highlight that. And then I'm going to just shift and use my right arrow to get all the way over to the last column of data. I don't care about all the stuff past that. I just need those. So I'm just going to click and drag across the columns that I need. And now, when I get my little cursor up there between any two columns, it doesn't matter which two, any two columns that are in the highlighted section, and double click, all of those columns are going to expand at the same time. So we've done the first nifty thing. Just get that cursor between two column headers, right in between them to make the little crosshatch, double click. And now at least I can see what's in those columns. Turns out we can do the same thing with rows also. Let me find a good row as an example. If I look in column L, I just happen to know it's already there, so you know. There's actually 2 lines of data there, and I'm only seeing 1. I can do the exact same thing with rows. I can come over here. There's row 2. There's row 3. I'm just clicking on the 2, clicking on the 3. And if I put my cursor right in between them, I'm going to get the same little cross. I can double click, and it will expand the row to fit the contents. And same thing again, I can drag across a bunch of them. In between any 2 of those, I can do it. I can select all and get them all at once. The point is this. Before I start mucking around with this spreadsheet, regardless of what I'm going to do with it, I have to at least know what the content is. And the default settings for rows and columns are generally not big enough, wide enough, or tall enough to show me what's in there. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to expand the columns, and I'm going to expand the rows so I can see what's there. I am going to mention one more thing very briefly. Sometimes I don't need all of the information in the column. So for example, if I look at row Q, the column header is Eventbrite payment processing. And the content that I'm interested in is just zeros all the way down. It's only a single character, right? I don't need a column that wide to see a zero. So what I might do instead, for a case like this, put my cursor in between two and just squeeze it over. Now, the problem is now I cannot see the entire header. I got plenty of room for the content, but what's the header? So what I often will find myself doing is manually adjusting the height of that row using the same crosshatch. I'm going to just pull it down a bit, kind of doesn't matter where. I'm going to highlight the entire row at once because I want to do something to the format there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to force it to have word wrapping. So the words don't go all the way straight across, but that they will start to break into lines. So I've got them highlighted. I'll right click anywhere in there. And I will select Format Cells. And in the Format Cells menu, we're going to see a tab number 2, called Alignment. And on that, I've got the option to wrap text. Now, what is that going to do for me? First, let me click it, wrap text, and I'm going to say, OK. Now, looking at the same column here, the column is narrower, which is great because now I can see more columns across my page. And I can also see the entire title at the same time without having it stretch the column out wider than it needs to be. When I double click between two columns, now it's not going to expand in one long line like it was originally. It's now going to compress itself just to the part that I need, like that. The point is this: we're trying to make it tidy. Spreadsheets can get pretty long and pretty wide with a lot of columns. So I want to make sure I can see the maximum number of columns across the spreadsheet, but still know what's in them, right? So those are some of the tricks I'm going to use. Expand columns, expand rows. I'm going to do a little word wrapping, and then I'm going to shrink back up to the greatest extent possible. Just trying to make things a little tidy. There, like that. So those are actually 4 quick tricks dealing specifically with rows and columns all around the first set of techniques, which is how do I even see what's on my spreadsheet? All right, so let's take it up a little. That's the easy peasiest part right there. So let's go up one more. Sometimes I don't need all the information. Remember, what I'm trying to get to is I want to be able to read the content so I can use it, right? So I can see what's there, I can understand it, maybe do something to it. But along with that, I want to see as many columns and as many rows as possible so I can see the most content as possible. It's got to be usable, but I want as much as I can. Well, sometimes we don't need everything that's in there. Like I've got, what is this right here? That's column S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, A, B. There's some stuff over there that's interesting to me, right? But then I've got to scroll across to get to it. Wouldn't it be slick if I can just get rid of the stuff that I don't need? Now, there's 2 ways to do that. I could right-click on a column or a row, and I can say, just delete it, right? Just get rid of that whole row, get rid of that whole column. Personally, I don't like to do that for a couple of reasons. One, I'm often inputting information from other spreadsheets, so I need a consistent set of columns going across. Second, maybe I will need it at some point. Maybe I do want to use that column at some point. So I kind of don't want to get rid of it, but I don't need to see it now. So what I want to do is I want to hide it. And it's very simple to do. Let's just start with a single column. So I clicked up here on the S. I got my little down arrow. I clicked right on the S, selected the whole column. Now, anywhere in that column, I can right click on it. There's my little menu again. And one of the options there is hide. It is the second to last option, and it's called hide. The column will stay in there. We're just going to tuck it away where it's out of our way. We're going to hide it like so. And now you see I go from R to T. And column S is hiding inside the 2. Visually, it's not taking up any space, but I haven't lost it in case for some reason I need it later. So that's getting rid of 1. Let's get rid of some more, right? I'm going to click on T. I'm going to simply drag across before letting go of the mouse. Now I've got 5 more columns. I can hide them all at once. Hide. And now we go from R to Y. And sometimes, frankly, sometimes it's information I know that's information in there that I know I need. I just don't need it right now. So I want to get it out of my way so I can see the stuff I'm actually interested in at this particular point. So we hide it away. It's kind of like sometimes once in a while, you got to put socks back in the sock drawer and you just pull them out when you need them, right? But you don't need them all right now. So we hide them. Or we tuck stuff underneath the bed, just to get it out of the way in the meantime. All right, so they're hiding away. Where do they go? How do I get them back? Well, it's pretty simple. We know that those columns are hiding between R and Y. So I've got to be able to pull them back out. And it's simple. I'm going to click on R and keep my mouse button down. I'm going to drag over to Y. So now I've highlighted R and Y. And what I'm going to tell Excel to do is all the stuff that's inside there, unhide it. So I've highlighted the 2 rows with 2 columns on either side. Right click. There's my menu. And the very last option is unhide. And there's all my stuff again, which is pretty cool. We can do the same thing with rows. There's rows 2, 3, 4, 5. We can hide them. Now it goes from 1 to 6. If I highlight from 1 to 6 and say unhide, they're all back again. Let's do one more thing with columns and rows here. One of the big problems, especially if you have a small monitor, and just my heart goes out to people that have to work with laptops with small screens. I've got a 46-inch screen here, so I can see a lot of stuff. So my heart goes out to you folks on smaller screens. I totally get it. And honestly, that's why some of these techniques that we've been doing are so important, because you don't have a lot of space to see stuff, right? So it's really important to know how to hide things away and get around your spreadsheet and all of that, because you don't have much room to see stuff. The last thing I want to mention about rows and columns, though, has to do with freezing panes. Here's a very common situation. Let me just bring that over a little bit. Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and part of number 10 showing in my columns here. And I've got 11 rows showing. If I scroll my spreadsheet, I want to see what's farther down past row 11. Suddenly, all of my column headers have scrolled away. Uh-oh. And I'm showing columns A through I and a part of J, but I know there's more stuff over there. If I scroll across, I've lost the first columns, right? So what do these relate to? And if I scroll in both directions, I've got no idea what I'm looking at because I've lost my header columns and I've lost my initial rows. I want to be able to scroll all around the spreadsheet and still be able to see column A and all of my headers across row 1. And the way I do that is with freezing panes. Freezing panes basically tells Excel, no matter where you scroll, this row has to be visible. No matter where you scroll, this column has to be visible. Scroll the rest of it, but leave these alone. And it is super simple to do. So I am going to click right here on B2 because I want everything above that to stay and I want everything to the left of that to stay. So I want row 1 and I want column A to stay. That is going to be the top left corner of the area of the spreadsheet that will scroll. And that's important because where you select that top left corner is going to determine what scrolls, what stays. So in this case, B2, that's my top left corner. And then I'm going to come up here to my view menu at the top, right up here. And I'm going to just click on my view tab. And there's an option up there. There's a button up there that says freeze panes. Because there's a row and there's a column, I want to freeze them in place. So when I click on that, I've got 3 options. Just freeze the top row, everything else can scroll. Just freeze the first column, everything else scrolls. But I want to keep my first row and my first column. So I mark B2 as my top left corner, and I'm going to choose the first option, freeze panes based on current selection. So I've activated that cell. I'm going to freeze panes. And now, if I scroll down to see what's below, my first row stays in place. So I've got all my headers. So I know what this content is. And if I scroll to the right, my first column stays in place also. So I know what that line of data refers to. So no matter where I'm scrolling, I can always see my first column with titles, my first row with column headers. And that's freeze panes. Super duper useful, especially if you're on a smaller screen. It's too easy to lose your header rows and your column titles and stuff like that. So being able to freeze panes lets you scroll all around the spreadsheet and you still know what it's referring to, what the information is about. You know what, while we're here, let's do one. Let me throw in a freebie here. Just looking at this visually, something I very regularly do is just like you have on a table where your column headers have a nice bold underline underneath them. Let's do that. So let me highlight all those cells across the top. On my home, I've got Calibri, bold, italics, underline, and right next to it, I've got a little 2x2 grid, which has my options for borders. Top, bottom, right, left, inside, outside, doubles, blah, 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 blah. I'm just simply going to choose a thick bottom border, just to visually set that aside. Necessary? No. Useful? Maybe, maybe not. Visually appealing? Yes. Okay. So that's all the stuff for rows and columns. First, we dealt with how do you actually see what's inside of your cells. Then we dealt with how do you manage your rows and columns so you can see as many as possible on your screen. So let's turn to some stuff that happens inside of those cells. Okay. Let me scroll back over. And find a fun column. This is just some visual clues. These are not going to be things that necessarily make it easier to use or understand the content, but just to make it more visually appealing, so you're not always having to kind of twist your brain around what you're looking at, basically, just to make it a bit more attractive, because after all, this is about user friendly. So let's make it friendly. All right. So just visually, I'm looking at column N, O, and P. I've got my headers up there. The headers are right in the middle of the cell. All the numbers are smushed off to the right-hand side. Looks ugly. So let's fix that. We could grab some cells like this, go to my home menu, center them, but I hate doing stuff manually, honestly. So I'm going to just highlight all these at once and just center them all at the same time. Bang. So now the contents are directly centered underneath the column heading, which makes me happy. Anything else we want to do? No. So that's one. The other thing that we can do, I do this on sort of a case-by-case basis. Depends on what I've got in the cells. Let me monkey with this a bit, just to make the next technique a little more obvious. Let me start by selecting a format. I'm do a wrap text here, so I'm going to do. Okay, wrap text. There. So I've got, in most cases, 3 lines of information in each cell. And all the information in the cells is at the bottom now. Okay. You might find it useful sometimes or visually appealing to get all the information in the middle of the cell, vertically in the middle. Well, we have a way to do that also. So right up here at the top in the menu, we had the left, justify, center, and right. But if we look above that, we have right here 3 buttons. Do you want the content at the top? Which personally, I do not like at all. I find it visually very confusing if you're trying to read across. You can put it in the middle. You can put it at the bottom. I tend to leave things at the bottom just because I'm used to looking at it that way. But if you put it in the middle, centered, it makes it very obvious. I'm having dust today, apparently. Okay, so just some ways to you can modify it to see what's going to make it easiest for you. The one place where this sometimes becomes useful is if I hide the grid lines, because right now I've got a little, these little gray grid lines between every cell and so forth. When I'm preparing something for publication, I'm going to grab something from here, I'm going to drop it into a Word document, or I'm preparing something like here's my spreadsheet of stuff, and I've got a chart and I've got some tables and stuff like that. I will very often get rid of those grid lines, which is also pretty easy to do, just to make it visually cleaner so I don't have all those extra lines, and it's just too much sometimes, visually too much. So the way you do that, on your menu at the top, you go over to View, and my first set of commands, normal view, page break, page layout, custom. I only work in normal view, quite honestly. Page break, is kind of irrelevant to me. Page layout, never. And you can't do it. You can't do page layout with frozen columns. I just work in normal. All right. So the next set of commands, what do you want to see? The ruler, there's no ruler. The formula bar, yeah, probably. Headings, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, C, D, always on. But sometimes I will turn off grid lines just to make it a bit cleaner. And in cases like that, when I turn off the grid lines, it is often very useful to have things middle, because it's easier to track across. So maybe it'll be useful to you, maybe not, but at least you know that the option exists so you can check it out for yourself. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn those back on. A lot of times when I'm doing data analysis or I'm creating customized spreadsheets for like data entry and forms and reports and stuff, I will often turn that off, turn off the grid lines. But up to you, at least you know that it exists. We've done that. Oh, one last thing though. Let me put everything back where it's supposed to be. Home, put everything back on the bottom. Okay. I'll even bold these, why not? All right. Sometimes, depending on what you've got there, maybe you want some columns to be centered and other columns not centered, depending on what it is. You can, let me just show you using these examples here. So let's uncenter all of that. And let's put it back over on the left. Okay. And we'll put L on the left also. All right. So I discussed, here's how you do one, and you hit the commands. Here's how you do multiple, just highlight across them and do it. But what if you want several columns at once, but they're not consecutive? Like I want L, not M, but I want O, not P, and I want Q to center, right? There is a way in Excel to select non-consecutive rows, non-consecutive columns, and non-consecutive cells. Like I want to highlight A2 and M4 and P7, but nothing in between, just non-consecutive information. The way you do that is you hold down your control key while you are clicking. So here's L, hands off. Now control, and I will click on N, and I will click on P, and I will click on S and T. So you can select non-consecutive. Normally you just like click and drag, and everything you dragged across is going to be selected. You don't have to. You can select non-consecutive items by holding down your control key. And the same thing with cells. Let's say you're doing a little report or something, you want to be able to highlight some of the information, and you want like, hey, look at this, and look at this, and look at this, and look at that, and they're not consecutive. You could do one, and then do the next one, and then do the next one, and then do the next one, like that. Again, tedious was a better way. So let me just undo those. Let's just control click here, 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 and there. I'm just grabbing some at random, but I'm holding down my control key so I can select multiple non-sequential, non-consecutive items, and then I can do them all at the same time. A little efficiency trick for you. It occurs to me I missed something at the very beginning. Let me show one more thing. No, it's too late. Okay. But let me select all and take off all of that. Okay. We'll skip number format. I will, since we're doing columns, let me throw in a freebie for you because we're going to do something very, very cool called Flash Fill in just a moment here. And we need to do something first before we can do that. So here is a free, if you already know it, sorry, I'm going to do something very cool right after this. But I've got to do the boring thing first. Okay, so where do I have my name? So here I've got first name and last name. I'm going to create another column next to it. And if you've never done it before, it's really easy. I want a column after F and before G. So I'm going to right click on G and say insert. And when you insert, it's going to insert before. Okay. And we're doing that for a reason. Same thing with rows. I've got row 2, row 3. If I want to put one in between, I'm going to right click on the 3, insert, and it's going to put it before. So 3 became 4, and there's my new 3, basically, is what's happened here. All right, that one I don't need, though. So undo that. But I needed a new column. So that's just how you do it. Just right click on a column, header, or a row number, and insert. Okay, here's why I did that. That's just a freebie for you. I've got 2 columns for names. I have Alexander White. And the reason why you see everything come up 3 times, because I took the same, honestly, I took the same data set and just copy. So everything's in there 3 times, just so I can easily create a bunch of lines of dummy data. But regardless, okay, so I have 2 columns for names, which is more than I want. And maybe I'm going to do a mail merge later. I'm going to do a little report later, or I just, for whatever reason, I don't want 2 columns. I want last name, first name. Excel has a very cool little trick called Flash Fill that will do that kind of work for you. All you have to do is tell it what you want, and then it will go and do the rest of it for you. Let me show you. So I've got first name, last name. What I really want is I want last name, comma, first name. So I'm going to do it once. And then I'm going to highlight down to the bottom, which is down here somewhere. Now, if you think that I'm going to do that manually 57 times, you're wrong. I want Excel to do it. There used to be, honestly, this is with the new version. I really like the old versions of Excel, the XP 2002 version, and it's where I do probably 90% of my work. But this Flash Fill is not available on that version, on those old versions. They're available on the new version, which is probably what 99.9% of the world uses because they're smart and I'm not. So we have access to a new cool tool. Check this out. So I've got the top one highlighted. And I was just notified I've got a question. Yes, going back to 306. Internet bad? Yes, we are going to have a recording for this. We're going to put it on our website. I'll show you the link at the end. Can you do the reverse for the Flash Fill and break it out? Yes, you can't believe. Yes, it's an extra step. I'll show you that also. Thank you. Okay, so let me go ahead and highlight. Now I've got all the rows highlighted. I'm going to go up to my Data tab. I've got a section on Get External, Queries, Refreshing, Sorting, Text to Columns, blah, blah, blah. But right in the middle, I've got a little spreadsheet with a little lightning bolt on it, and it's called Flash Fill. Now, depending on how you have your options set up, you may or may not see the titles. So I'm going to show you this is the hard way to do it. I'll show you the keyboard also. But it's like a little spreadsheet, and it's got a little yellow lightning bolt on it. It's called Flash Fill. And when I click that, Look what Excel just did for me. Last name, comma, first name. That is very cool. It will do that for dates. It will do that for numbers. It will do that for merging stuff like this. There's a lot of different options. This is the one that I use the most often. Or maybe I wanted it to be Alexander White, just like that, right? Well, let me do the same thing. So the training cell, the example cell is the top one, Alexander White. I can do a flash fill and it will replicate that all the way down. Because if you notice, there you go, first name, last name, all the way down. Now, I told you I'd show you even easier way to do it. So that's, type Alexander White. I see the comment chat, I'll be right there. So White, comma, Alexander. And I could highlight and go and click on the button, but honestly, if I'm highlighting, my hands are on the keyboard. So instead of moving my mouse up there, the keyboard shortcut is Control E. You might know Control E. If you use Microsoft Word a lot, Control E is the shortcut on Word for centering. But here on Excel, it is the shortcut for flash fill. So we had a question, can you do the opposite? Yes, you can. So let's say I have, let me just get rid of these. I'm going to hide them. So let's say my original data were Alexander White, comma Alexander. And I just want to pull that first name out of there, or just the last name. Let me go ahead, highlight two columns, right click, insert. And now I'm going to insert two columns because I've got two highlighted. It's going to insert two. Okay. So let's train it. I want this one, Alexander, there, and I want White over here. It does not do two, but formatting text, spark lines, skip all that. Let's do this. It's gonna be a little trickier. If you got a better way to do this, tell me, but it's gonna be a little trickier. So let me highlight all the way down. Let me, good enough, Control E. There's my last name. Or actually my first name, excuse me. There's my first name. So it went to this, it will go to the cell next to it and it will extract the sample information. However, what if I do it here? It will jump back too, because what it's going to do is it's going to look for where's the information in the example cell over to the left. It's going to look to the left and it's going to look for it, and then it's going to replicate the pattern. So yes, we can do the opposite, where we are taking the information and breaking it out into separate pieces just as well. And why did I scrap that? All right, so there. There we go. Control E, and now I've extracted it. So yes, you can go in both directions. Now, let me go ahead and just get rid of those. Okay. And then I will look at chat. Would you show that again? Because that is so cool. Yes, I will. And yes, it is. Okay. So let's start with, let me unhide these. I'm going to do it kind of quickly. Okay. And there will be a video also. So not to panic. Let me insert, what do I want to do? I'm unhiding. That's what I'm doing. Unhide. Okay. So first, to merge information, here's my sample, Alexander. And I will warn you, if for some reason I misspelled Alexander, it may be prone to error. So make sure your example is correct. All right. So there's my example. It's going to draw from E and F. Let me highlight. Let's highlight down, for example, right? There we go. And then because I like keyboards and not mice, I can click on the flash fill button under data right there in the middle, or Control E. And now it has replicated my example. It's replicated the pattern of my example. And to go the other direction, let me insert 2. Here I want, let's say white, Alexander. I'm going to, I cannot do both at once, unfortunately. So let me, which is one limitation, but it's still such a huge time saver. I'm willing to forgive Microsoft for that. Now let's go get the other one. And Control E. And now I've gone back to, it's going to look over to the left at a prior column, look for the same content, and replicate the pattern that I have shown it. So if the pattern is just give me the stuff up to the comma, that's what it's going to give me. If it's going to be give me the last word or the last piece or the last part of the data, that's what it's going to do. If you have long numbers, and frankly, I don't need 6328005 or 800. I just want the last 3 numbers, 219. I'm going to give a problem now. This is my once per session when I outsmart myself. What did it give me? 3W0 because it's finding the wrong information. Where did it actually get the 3W0 from? So pulling pieces, the point is this, pulling a piece out of a string, it's not gonna be consistently successful. If you have multiple information, like I've got, if I put spaces and I had a space between each of these, where I now have 2 pieces of information in the same cell, I'm just very, very quickly here, like that. And here's 5219. Now it can actually find something discrete. We looked at it, we didn't see a pattern. So it kind of depends. I guess the point is this, it kind of depends on what you've got in there. Very good at some things, troublesome at others. But honestly, the number one place where I use this, names. And it does that great. Okay. I'm moving on from that before I get myself stumped again. All right. Let's do some visual aids. All right. So that's the whole third set here. We are coming into a very fast finish. So let me shrink this down because this, we don't actually need to see the content at all. And let me get rid of some stuff that I've just added. Let's delete those. Okay. You know what? I don't even need that. Let me hide it. I'm just tucking some stuff away. Yeah, okay, whatever. Let's hide those also. Sometimes we just want to lay it out so we can make it look like a nicely formatted table. Table formatting, right? Especially if I'm going to grab this and drop it into a Word document or something like that. And especially if I am hiding my grid lines, which is what I'm going to do now. View, unmarked grid lines. I want to make a nice, lovely table. Pretty simple to do. I'm going to show you the easy ways to do it, and then I'm going to show you a way that actually works better for me, so you've got some options. All right, so I want a little table. I'm just going to grab some of this. I don't need all of this to demonstrate. So I'm going to just grab and highlight a chunk. Up here, under Home, clipboard, font stuff, size, justification, vertical, horizontal, number type, conditional formatting, and then something called format as table. And when I click on that, I've got a series of default options on different ways to lay this out. Here's the problem we often run into. You have a lot of lines. It's hard for the eyes to track across the lines. So one of the things we're trying to do to make this more user-friendly is to put in those visual clues. So like every other line is highlighted to make it easy for your eyes to read the data. I'm going to grab one kind of at random. Light styles, medium styles, dark styles, yeah, whatever. I'm going to choose a medium style blue. I'm going to click on it. And where is the data? And it's the stuff that I highlighted. Yes, my table has headers there across the top. Okay. And now I've got a nice dark blue header at the top. In this case, light blue, white, alternating rows. There's something, so it works great, but there's something I really don't like about this, which I will show you. Now, one thing I can do, which is pretty cool, if you look at the very bottom right corner, it's almost impossible to see, but there's a little dark spot there, a little handle, which tells me this is the end of the table, the farthest down and farthest across. Like I said, it's almost impossible to see, but it's actually there. I don't know why things get tucked away, but it's there. Well, what I can do, if I hover my cursor over that, I've got my little, it turns into a little diagonal set of arrows, which means I can move that corner around to a new place. I can, for example, drag it over to the right. Now I've got more columns. Or I can drag it to the left. Or I can drag it up. Or I can drag it down. The point is, I can adjust the area, the rows and columns that are included in my table. And I will admit, I didn't know that was there for quite a long time because frankly, I just didn't see it. It's little, but it's there. So if you hover your cursor, you get your little diagonal cursor, and from there, I can move it up, down, right, left, wherever I want, which is neat. Now, what do I not like about this? I see this on a lot of spreadsheets, and quite honestly, when I get spreadsheets from like the New Mexico Public Ed Department on student data and junk like that, they always do this, and it just makes no sense to me. Look at the top up here. There's my order type, and I've got a drop-down menu with all of my options. And over here, first name, and there's all the different first names that are included in that set. And event name. Honestly, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with that information. Dates. Now, one thing I do know that I can do is I can use those as filters. So for example, under first name, I've got Alexander, Amelia, and Ava. Let me uncheck Amelia. Oh, and the rows with Amelia are suddenly hidden. They're in there, but they are compressed. They're not even hiding. They're just shrunk up to the minimum. So I can manually grab them and expand them. I don't really know what that's for, to be honest. So I never use it. All right. Unhide. And if I want them back, I've got to go back up there and reselect it again. So I don't know. It didn't work for me. Okay. You can do it. Maybe not. So let me undo a bunch of crap. Okay. We're about there. All right. So unhide, hide, let's hide it. Okay. So one of the ways you can get around that is by saying you do not have headers. And let me select a bunch again. It does that because it says I have header columns. And this is the header row. This is the header. And then it's going to say, okay, what's the content underneath it? What's the unique content underneath it? But I can just turn that off. So when I say my table has headers, I will say no. And look what it does now. It even makes it worse. Because I still have all those filters, and it actually created, I said, oh, I don't have headers. And it says, oh, in that case, let's make some headers for you. And we're going to call them column 1, 5, 6, 7, This is getting into the area of Microsoft that causes me to use a lot of inappropriate adult language when it tries to do crap for me. I don't want that. How in the world do I stop it from doing that? Turns out there's a way. Because all I'm trying to do is just highlight every other row so I can read it easily, right? So instead of using tables, well, I could say, all right, format as a table. Down here, I've got new table style, and here's all the different options, and what do I want to do with them? And that is more than I want to do. So instead, because all I want to do is just look at the rows, every other row, right? So instead, I'm going to do something a bit tricky, all right? And this is going to be something you will probably want to write down if this technique is useful to you. I'm going to use conditional formatting, and I'm going to do something a bit tricky to create the same thing, right? So I've got all these rows, and I want every other one to be highlighted. So instead of format as a table, I'm going to sneak around the draconian formats of, I had another word come to mind that I won't use, but just basically all the stuff that it's trying to force me to do, get around it. Okay. I'm going to go to conditional formatting. And I'm going to say, let's create a new rule. Now I can say highlight rules if the value is greater than this or less than that. And those things are very useful in many cases. But I want it every other row. So I'm going to create a new rule and do something tricky. Now, when I'm creating a new rule, format the cells in a particular way if they are greater than, less than, equal, if they've got some kind of content. If the cell is this, do that. Or only if the value inside the cell is greater than a certain amount, mark it in some way, or less than. I'm going to skip all of those. Those are very useful in many cases, but that's not what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm going to say, use a formula to determine which cells to format. I'm going to select that. So now I can put in a formula. And this is what you're going to want to write down. And let me do something nice for you. Let me type it out really big up here for starters, so you can see what it is. And you might want to look at the video later because it'll be on there also. All right. The formula that I want is going to be equal. Oh, let's blow that up a lot too. Okay. So I want to make sure you can see this clearly. All right. Equals. If the value of the cell equals, ready? This is going to be cool. Mod. Oops. Oh, you know what? Hold on. This is going to be silly. Hold on. Let me do this. Let me unhide. Okay. Let me unhide because it's doing weird things on me here. Unhide. Okay. There we go. All right. If it's equal to the modification, why is it? Oh, all right, hold on. I apologize. Let me unfreeze my panes. Unfreeze. There we go. Okay. Equals mod, a modification of the row, parenthesis, parenthesis, comma 2 equals 0. This is what, interestingly, one of the weirdest formulas in all of Excel because it has two equal signs. If it equals this and this equals that. It's the only case I know in Excel where you do this. But here's what it's telling me. It's going to look and it's going to say, row number. If the row number is divisible by 2 and as a modified integer, it has no decimal points. Basically, if it is equally divisible by 2, the row number, then format it, right? So it's going to take a look at the row number. It's going to convert it. It's going to divide by 2. It's going to convert it, and it's going to check to see if it is a whole number, basically. And if it is, then we can do something to it. So basically, what it's going to tell me is, hey, if you have an even numbered row, here's what I want you to do. All right, and I'm going to use that. Let me put a thing in front of it. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So here's how I'm going to use it. This was a little tricky, which is why I said you might want to write it down. And that's why I made it big for you. So let's grab these. Let's go to home, conditional formatting, same place we were before. Show formatting rules. Let's create a new rule, use a formula, and I'm going to type it just exactly like that. I'm going to type it in there, mod row, parenthesis, comma 2, parenthesis equals 0. Now, whenever you create your own rule, so I put in my, how do you find it? Like, what am I looking for? Okay. Then I select format and I say, okay, if I find that condition, it's greater than, it's less than, it's equal to, it contains, whatever it is, it's a date, whatever it is. Now I tell it, okay, if we find this, what do you want it to look like? In this case, I'm going to go to fill, because I'm going to fill it with a color. I'm going to choose a lovely color. I can even choose a border around it. I don't care. I can change the font size. I can change the font color if I want to. Whatever, basically, however I want it to look, I'm setting it up in the format. Then I say, okay. And I say, okay. And oops, that's supposed to be a 0. And okay. And there, now it has actually done what I want it to do. Which is cool. Now I can read my spreadsheet correctly and easily all the way across. I do see the time. I apologize. Let me show you something super duper fast, and then we're going to call it. Okay. I've got another spreadsheet over here. Here's all of my session titles again from this sample set. I don't want to know I don't want all the duplicates. I don't want all this. Just give me a simple list that has everything just once. So I don't have to weed through 6 lessons with Flip and just what's actually there. Just tell me the content one time. You're going to like this. I'm going to highlight it like that. This is really fast, really cool, and then we're done. And I'm going to go up here to data. Now, before I use something called flash fill right in the middle, but right below it is a button called remove duplicates. Right there. And it looks like a column with a bunch of stuff in it, and then a column with only 2 items filled in. That's what it looks like. It's called remove duplicates. Okay, bang. All the duplicates are gone, leaving me with a single list with just the unique content. Let me take one last check. Take your time. I need to step out. Melody, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here. And that is all I've got. So, once again, I am David Bowman, the Executive Director for the Four Corners Regional Education Cooperative #1. I will mention that we are going to be posting this video along with all of our other sessions on our Tech Bits page. which I will put into the chat, but basically it's just nmrec1.org/tech-bits. So https://nmrec1.org/tech-bits. It's in the chat, but this video will probably be up there. I'm going to just guess probably by tomorrow afternoon, but certainly by Monday afternoon. So you're welcome to go back and take a look at that in our other sessions. We've got more coming up you might want to look at. And one last comment. If you ever want me to walk you through some of these techniques or others on your own spreadsheets, you are quite welcome to just email me. We can set up a time, do a little screen sharing. I'd be very happy to assist you as you're mastering, conquering, and subduing Microsoft Excel so you can make it work for you. So thank you all very much for being here. I hope you all have a great day and a lovely weekend. Take care, everybody.